I played more new games in 2025 than probably any other year I've been alive. I don't know why, no particular reason, but it was a great year for video games. So here's all the games I played this year and what I thought of them. Plus, I'll hand out my own personal game awards at the end. The first new game I played this year was Split Fiction from Hazelight Studios. Split Fiction is the third, and in my opinion, best so far in a spiritual series of games that can only be played by two players cooperatively. In this case, you and a friend play as Zoe and Mio, fantasy and sci-fi writers respectively, who are getting Gilderoy Lockharted by a tech company that steals writers' ideas through a newfangled virtual reality machine. Suddenly plunged into each other's stories, you crisscross between a wild blend of sci-fi and fantasy worlds, navigating collapsing stars, Halloween towns, and frozen kingdoms in a quest to reclaim your intellectual property. I'd say the gameplay here is as good or better than It Takes Two, and the story and protagonists are miles better. There's still some stilted dialogue, and some of the central tension is based on the dubious premise that a fantasy writer would be completely dismissive of science fiction and vice versa, but there's still some real heart and humor, and the characters are much more likable than the protagonists of It Takes Two. A lot of cooperative games can lean more towards parallel play, but not Split Fiction. You really have to work together, grapple with the game's systems, and have each other's backs. The thing I'll always remember about Split Fiction is the imaginative level design. Like, there's one world where you gradually raise baby dragons from eggs to adolescents to full-grown adults for a fiery Dragon Rider finale, and it's just really unique design. Good game. Continuing in chronological order, the next game I played was Blue Prince. This will not be a game for everyone, but if you like puzzle games like I do, this carves out a completely new corner of the genre. So many games and puzzle games are versions of things that came before. How many puzzle platformers or point-and-click mysteries are there? But in the future, there will be a whole new category of games that people will say are like Blue Prince. Blue Prince is a game about exploring and unlocking the mysteries within your recently deceased great-uncle's mansion, which was bequeathed to you under the condition that you locate the hidden Room 46. The mansion, which takes on a different shape every day, is explored by opening doors and drafting which room you're about to enter. Part maze, part roguelike, and all mystery, Blue Prince was crafted almost entirely by one person and is the kind of puzzle that will have you reaching for a pen and paper. There are so many secrets, hidden rooms and passageways to unlock, sub-mysteries and backstory and hidden compartments, and mysterious connections between different rooms. It is unbelievably deep and immensely satisfying to unravel. This is one of the two games that surprised me the most this year, and it was one of my favorites I played. Next up is the game that took over the world this year, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I have to say, I really liked Clair Obscur, but I was pretty taken aback by the amount of love this game received. I finished it and thought it was great, but then I went online and a bunch of people were crowning it the game of the century, which I definitely don't agree with. I think that colored my perspective on Clair Obscur, and I have a hard time talking about games that I think are really good, but not perhaps as mind-melting as the consensus would have me believe. This is probably an objective masterpiece, but subjectively a solid game for me, which I emphasize is not to say that I didn't like it. I thought the opening hook of the game was incredible. The score was amazing, and the writing, mocap, and voice work of the characters was next level. The world, the art, and the presentation of the combat were all fantastic. I did think the area exploration was a bit dull mechanically, and the optional platforming segments were completely out of place. I also think the characters and their skill trees were designed in creative ways, but the game sort of incentivizes you not to experiment with skill trees, or with your roster in general. I'd bet most of you picked a few core skills and stuck with them most of the game. I think the turn-based combat in Expedition 33 was cinematic and exciting. The main element here is the ability to parry or dodge enemies' attacks, which keeps you perpetually on your toes. But I heard a lot of takes saying that Expedition 33 completely revitalized turn-based combat, and I don't agree with that at all. First of all, I already like turn-based combat, and I don't think it's boring. Secondly, although I enjoyed this system, it's too action-based for my liking. If you're very good at the parry timing, you can just never get hit, and it doesn't matter what choices you make. If you're not good at the parry timing, then you're just gonna lose, and it also doesn't matter what choices you make. I'm okay at the parry timing, which means, by my own logic, my choices matter the maximum amount. But it's hard to call this the best turn-based combat when the focus isn't on the turn-based combat. Finally, I thought the story, while extremely engaging, had perhaps a few too many elements working against each other on a thematic level. Hard to say more than that without spoilers, but I think one of the main twists kind of undermines the main quest in some ways. I like the story and I like the twist, but I'm not sure how well they work together. That said, the ending, or endings rather, were very thought-provoking and bittersweet. This is why I don't like talking about games like this. I feel like any attempt to separate myself from the mainstream opinion makes it sound like I don't like the game, which is not the case at all. But hey, obviously Clair Obscur received its flowers many times over, and it doesn't need me to advocate for it. It's a fantastic, original game. In addition to software, there was also a milestone hardware release this year. I got a Switch 2 at midnight the day it released. Not because I was particularly excited about it, which I actually wasn't at all, but I'm always up that late anyway. I knew I would get one eventually, and there's a Best Buy 10 minutes from my house. Didn't pre-order or anything, just showed up. That turned out to be completely unnecessary, as Switch 2s were on the shelves the next day, but it did come bundled with Mario Kart World. I haven't played a ton of Mario Kart World, but, you know, it's a Mario Kart. Remember when this was coming out and Nintendo announced it would cost $80 because its immersion and replay value were so far beyond anything we're used to? I don't know what they were smoking, because this is just a Mario Kart. Supposedly the main thing that justifies that cost is the open world free roam mode, which I don't care about at all, but I also didn't pay full price, so whatever, I guess. The other innovation here is that you can race from course to course in more of a marathon race as opposed to multiple laps around a single circuit. That's kind of cool actually, and I like the knockout tours where the bottom 4 racers get eliminated each leg. But this is a game I've pretty much exclusively broken out at holidays or with friends. If I were to play a Mario Kart right now, it would be this one, because I don't know it as well, and that's interesting. But as of this moment, I would say at least 8 and 64 are superior Mario Karts. In July, I played Kaizen, a factory story, which isn't a Zachtronics game because Zachtronics shuttered in 2022 and rebranded as Coincidence, but it's basically another Zachtronics game. If you've never played a Zachtronics game, they're essentially programming puzzle games where you have to design and optimize machines to take on various tasks. In this case, Kaizen sends you to a Japanese company in the 1980s, where your job is to optimize the production lines of VCRs, camcorders, rice cookers, and many more consumer electronics. I love these games, and I like the theme of this one. There's a bit of a story woven throughout, and between levels you can indulge in this solitaire pachinko hybrid to blow off steam, which might be needed because this game gets pretty tough. However, I think the interface, tools, and atmosphere are some of the friendliest this team has ever designed. This probably didn't blow my mind as much as my first Zachtronics game, which was Space Chem, but it's still really good. I didn't play this until later in the year, but the next game in release order is Peak. In Peak, you and a few friends using proximity chat attempt to scale 4 successive peaks while battling hunger, stamina, the elements, and gravity. Every 24 hours, the 4 biomes are randomized, so you do have multiple chances to experiment with routes, but every day is also a new and different challenge. You can give your friends a hand up, share food, and use climbing tech like ropes and pitons. Peak is really fun. This turned out to be a huge hit on Steam, and it's silly, addicting, and really challenging. I love climbing games. There's few rewards that match the satisfaction of reaching the top of a mountain, and few stakes that match the possibility of falling to your death in the attempt. You can play alone, but it feels like a real quest with friends, and it's pretty funny when you or one of your friends falls to their death and their voice fades into the distance.
No!
It wasn't quite a launch title, but the big Nintendo Switch 2 game this year was Donkey Kong Bananza. That's right, he's finally back to kick some tail. In Bananza, DK and a young Pauline are making their way to the planet core, where wishes are granted, by descending through imaginative and varied layers beneath the planet's surface. The core mechanic of Bananza is the ability to smash almost any piece of terrain you can see, which you can use to dig tunnels, remove obstacles, pick up pieces to wield as weapons or surf with, or smash terrain together to create platforms. Different sorts of terrain also have different properties, which make for a very cool, physicsy world. The smashing mechanic is pretty good, and they did well to craft levels that aren't totally broken by this ability. A climbing, smashing DK is fun to control, and you're given plenty of satisfying things to smash. I like most of the music, the level design, and I don't care about the DK redesign, it's fine with me. I am a Donkey Kong fan, and I had a ton of fun with Bananza, but it is wild how much and how fast this game has faded from my mind since playing it, and I think that's for a few reasons. First of all, and this is coming from someone who likes mindless collectibles, the way the collectibles were done here isn't sitting quite right with me. For the first 6 or 7 layers, I was 100%ing the levels before I moved on, but with a few exceptions, most Banandium gems are just sitting somewhere, so you just slam the ground to detect them and then dig or climb to the gem. If you're not sure where a gem is, you can buy maps, or more cost-effectively, smash the terrain to find maps to their locations. That process really started to feel like busy work, and eventually I started following the main objectives, thinking I would come back for the rest of the gems, but never feeling motivated to do so. It's a weird conundrum. Merely beating the game without bothering to collect Banandium gems isn't very satisfying, but collecting every Banandium gem is repetitive and tedious. It reminds me of what Nintendo had to say about the Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, that they weren't actually expecting players to hunt them all down, but scattering so many throughout the game meant that there were collectibles to be found wherever you happened to look. That actually brings me to my second point. I can't help but notice that ever since Breath of the Wild, Nintendo's flagship games have become more and more homogenous, or shall we say, switchified. I'm thinking of Tears of the Kingdom, Echoes of Wisdom, Mario Odyssey, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and to a lesser extent, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Here's a few hallmarks of Nintendo's modern design ethos. Highly manipulable environments. Think terraforming in New Horizons, smashing terrain in Bonanza, terrain creation in Echoes of Wisdom, and the Ultra Hand abilities in Tears of the Kingdom. Not to mention climbing and more navigation tools than ever before. Temporary or breakable tools, like the breakable tools and weapons in Zelda and Animal Crossing, the swingable and surfable chunks of terrain in Donkey Kong, summons in Echoes of Wisdom, and even Cappy's possession powers in Odyssey. Collectible outfits, especially outfits that confer buffs and abilities. This might sound insignificant, but why did Link, Zelda, Mario, and Donkey Kong all start changing up their wardrobe at the same time? At this point, it's just the main thing I expect to collect in Nintendo games. Making almost all content optional. Nintendo has been stocking these worlds with extreme numbers of collectibles and challenges, but making almost all of this content optional. They've also emphasized, especially in the Switch Zeldas and Donkey Kong Bonanza, that there is no one right way to solve a puzzle or reach a collectible. And while this can lead to satisfying player-directed solutions, I often found myself at a shrine, a power moon, or a Banandium gem feeling a bit sheepish about how I got there. In addition to everything I just said, I also feel the art styles and color palettes of these games are all very similar. And while these games have all planted their flag in these new design principles, none of them have been that innovative in the story department. Every game I just mentioned brought back classic villains, and rather than telling new kinds of stories, every one of these games feels more like a Smash Ultimate style remix of its series history. Let me be very clear, these are all great games, and I don't think a single point I brought up is inherently negative. But I'm kinda bummed and concerned that these games are starting to feel so similar, and I think one of Nintendo's strengths is that they have these different franchises that they can approach very differently. The last time 3D Link, Mario, and Donkey Kong were on the same console was the N64, and those games all have wildly different tones from one another. Whatever you think about DK64, that game had personality. I like Donkey Kong Bonanza, but I can't shake the feeling that I would like it a lot more if I hadn't played all of those other games. The other Switch 2 release that I checked out was the Mario Party Jamboree TV expansion/update that adds mouse, microphone, and camera minigames. I've played every Mario Party game, more on that in a future video, so I was compelled to play this even though I thought it looked terrible. I gotta say, the mouse minigames surprised me. They were clever and used the mouse well and made me interested to see how else Nintendo could implement mouse controls in the future. However, the mic and camera minigames? No. No. Those are classic Nintendo gimmick slop that nobody asked for and nobody needs. The controls don't work well and the games aren't even interesting. I still like Mario Party Jamboree, but this edition was absolutely unnecessary, and I would have preferred more boards or something. Obviously, this wasn't a full game release, but I figured I'd still give it a mention. In August, I played a cute little puzzle game called Is This Seat Taken? Every level is a logic puzzle where you have to arrange bus passengers, partiers, or theater goers according to their seating preferences. Some prefer to sit alone, or by windows, or not to have their view obstructed. Some are put off by strong smells, and others are little pig pens that haven't showered. It's fun. You can probably tell from this clip whether you'd like it or not. Didn't leave a huge impression on me, but it was a fun playthrough. Oh boy. 6 years after the first trailer, Team Cherry practically shadow-dropped Hollow Knight's Silksong, crashing multiple online stores the day it launched. This was far and away the most anticipated game of the year, and easily my most anticipated game. Very few games have ever attained this level of hype, and even fewer have lived up to that hype, but Silksong was everything I wanted and more. Silksong follows Hornet in the far-off realm of Farloom, where she's hunted for her weaver ancestry and has to contend with a cult of silken threads connected to the mysterious ancient citadel high atop Farloom. As promised, there is plenty of silk and plenty of song. Farloom is a bigger, richer, more vibrant, more imaginative, and more dangerous world than Hallownest. I never thought the environs of Hallownest were drab, but they seem samey by comparison. In fact, with all due respect to Hollow Knight, it's hard to talk about Silksong or even experience it without drawing comparisons to the first game. There were a lot of elements here that I initially pegged as inferior versions of their analogs in Hollow Knight, but that slowly won me over as the game went on. At first I thought this poser Chakra had nothing on Cornifer, but, Pashanka. I liked the fleas, I thought at first, but they're no grubs. But then the game went on, and I don't know, the fleas in their traveling circus have a lot more charm and personality than the grubs ever did. Initially, I said the Bell Beast, Hornet's main source of fast travel, was cool, but not as cool as the stag from the first game. But then I got to Act 3 and encountered the Bell Eater, and dang it, I think I like the Bell Beast more than the stag. I do think I still might like the charms more than the tool system, but the tools and crests are still really cool. My main trepidation around Silksong was actually around Hornet herself. After all, the knight was meticulously designed as a player character, while Hornet was originally designed as an enemy, and all her Shaws and Adinos had to be translated into a playable moveset for Silksong. Plus, the knight is from the Legend of Zelda school of mute protagonists, so how would it change this world to have a protagonist with a personality who actually talks to NPCs? Well, it turns out I don't know better than Team Cherry, because those were two of my favorite parts of the game. Hornet's movement compared to Hollow Knight is like going from 50cc to 150cc. She can sprint, dive, heal in midair, and float to the ground like Princess Peach, which is the perfect blend of silly and serious. And her dialogue works so well I can't imagine this game without it. She's competent, formidable, a bit haughty, and cold with a lot of inner warmth that comes through in some of the game's best interactions. Seriously, hats off to the writing here. Silksong isn't engaged in the same kind of storytelling as something like Clair Obscur or Ghost of Yotei, but I love the massive world and the history suggested by the artifacts and lore scattered around Farloom. I also think that many story and character moments evoke more emotion than Hollow Knight. Without spoiling anything, changes to the characters and the world state throughout the game were dramatic and affecting. Even if it wasn't that hard, I loved the fight with Grandmother Silk, and the true ending here is incredible. I think the very first encounter with Lace was the first moment that had me in awe of what this game could be, and it just never let up from there. While we're talking about boss fights, it's probably also worth mentioning the difficulty. Silksong is difficult, definitely more difficult than Hollow Knight, but it never feels unfair, and some of the difficulty is exaggerated. I mean, there were people who beat the game within 2 or 3 days of release talking about it being too difficult. Do you know how long I spent on some of these NES games as a kid? If the difficulty is a turnoff for you, I get it, but for me it was perfect, and I loved all the arenas and quests and boss fights, which I thought were immensely satisfying to overcome. This was a 10 out of 10 for me, and just for fun, here's the Hornet I carved into a pumpkin this year. There were a bunch of sequels this year, and another one is Borderlands 4. Borderlands 2 was awesome, and a lot of my goodwill towards this franchise is carried on the wings of Borderlands 2 nostalgia. I really didn't like Borderlands 3 for a variety of reasons, so I went into Borderlands 4 with my expectations completely reset. I thought Borderlands 4 was good. I think the most important part of any Borderlands game is the Vault Hunters, and I really liked the Vault Hunters this time. I played as Vex and Rafa, and I thought there were a lot of fun and interesting paths down the skill trees. I also liked the guns more this time, and some of the additions like enhancements and rep kits. The story in Borderlands 4 is better than Borderlands 3, but it also doesn't get in the way of what the game really wants you to be doing, which is exploring its open world. This is the first time I can remember that the Vault Hunters have actually hunted vaults outside of the main story, which was cool. Really, the main reason all content exists in Borderlands, be it main or side content, is to give you a reason to put your skills and guns to use, and I feel like Borderlands 4 does understand that. I like climbing on the environments to snipe enemies, or approaching encampments in different ways. A lot of things players were already doing, like farming bosses, have been made more convenient than ever. I think Borderlands 4 is a step in the right direction, and I had fun playing through it cooperatively, but I'm not excited about this one in the same way I am about some of these other games. I don't have a lot of specific criticisms of Borderlands 4, but it's still missing something. I might play it more when DLC comes out, and who knows, maybe my opinions will evolve, but for now, this is a game I had fun with, but moved on from and haven't thought a lot about since. The other sequel I was really excited about this year was Hades 2. Hades 2 has been playable in early access since 2024, but I avoided messing with it until the full release. Hades 2 is awesome. This time the plot revolves around the vengeful witch daughter of Hades, Melinoe, who was separated from her family as a child when the House of Hades was overthrown by Kronos, the Titan of Time, and raised as a dark sorceress with a lifelong mission of reclaiming the underworld. Instead of fighting your way out of Hades, you're battling your way into the depths, and also fighting your way to the top of an embattled Mount Olympus, where your Olympian relatives are fending off another ancient threat. I would say Hades 2 is more iterative than revolutionary, but that's not a bad thing. In many ways, Hades 2 is undeniably superior to the original Hades. The combat is a bit sharper, the world is bigger and more packed with secrets and characters, and it has the nostalgia of the original to draw on. However, I still prefer the original in a few ways. I think I like the weapons more in Hades, and some of the god powers, and Hades is just a better and more personal antagonist than Kronos. Kronos was a bit disappointing. I mean, he's the Titan of Time, and I feel like they didn't explore enough cool avenues with that. And the way the story resolves Chronos' fate is not with a bang, but a whimper. Also, part of what blew my mind about the original Hades was the way Supergiant wove real storytelling into a roguelike game. But this time I knew that would be the case, and some of the tricks I felt like I'd seen before. But in the grand scheme, those are all minor complaints. Hades 2 is still incredibly stylish. The music is insanely good, and it feels like a good encapsulation of this story and world. I love the fact that the Sirens are a punk rock band. Mount Olympus is cool. Most importantly, Hades 2 has some of my favorite gameplay of the year, and I would happily fire up another run right now. Yet another sequel. In October, I played Ghost of Yotei. I personally find that it can be hard to get into these kinds of games, but I knew I wanted to play this, so I just threw myself into it and committed. I've played Ghost of Tsushima, and I think I like Ghost of Yotei more. Ghost of Yotei trades some of the historical realism of its predecessor for a pulpier revenge story. Still, it was nice to murk unsuspecting victims with kunai and kusarigama without worrying what my samurai uncle would think about it. Your objective in Ghost of Yotei is clear and all-consuming. Find and kill the members of the Yotei Six, the gang of rogue samurai that murdered your family. Yotei is a beautiful open-world game with a lot of style. It's very, very cinematic, and one of the new developments is a weapon system that lets you wield dual katanas, an odachi, yari, longbows, and matchlock firearms. This is also one of the few games where I actually enjoy stealth sections, and in fact actively seek them out. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but the tools at your disposal in these games just make stealth and assassination really fun. I don't know, this game was pretty much what I was expecting it to be. I was neither disappointed nor blown away by Ghost of Yotei, but I did think the story was affecting and good, and the swordplay is as satisfying as ever. Also, crossing names off your sash with the blood of your victims is a pretty nice touch. Even though it came out in October, probably the most recent game I played this year was Jackbox Party Pack 11. As is tradition, Jackbox dropped 5 new party games that can be played together on the TV using your phone as a multifaceted controller. This time there's Doominate, a caption contest where you try to ruin prompts by adding a negative twist. Think Quiplash with more structure. I actually like most of the Quiplash likes more than Quiplash itself, and this is no exception. Hearsay is a game where players use their phone's microphone to produce sound effects, vote on the funniest, and watch clips of their sound effects being used out of context. This has a few technical problems, like everyone's mic picking up everyone else's sound unless you spread out into different rooms, and also spoiling the surprise factor because you can hear everyone recording their sounds. I think this one's going to be very group dependent, but I'm taking a stance and I am anti-hearsay. Cookie House is a drawing game where, instead of drawing per se, you decorate cookies. It's fine, but not better than Champed Up or TKO. Suspectives is probably the most interesting and high-concept game from the pack. It's social deduction where everyone answers a survey. One player is chosen as a culprit, and the culprit's answers are revealed one by one as players defend themselves and accuse one another. I like Suspectives, and I think it would work best with a big group who don't know each other extremely well. Legends of Trivia is a co-op trivia adventure based vaguely on D&D. Co-op trivia is kind of interesting, and I liked this one because I like trivia, but I think for this to be really good, it would need to be way harder. Fun, but too easy. Solid pack overall, and a good time, but nothing mind-blowing. However, the last new game I played this year was Dispatch. I said before that 2 games really surprised me this year, and this is the other one. Dispatch is part video game, part animated TV show that was released episodically in 8 installments, or episodes. It follows Aaron Paul as Mecha Man, a third-generation superhero in a super-filled Los Angeles who loses his mech suit and is forced into semi-retirement as a superhero dispatcher, leading a ragtag team of reformed villains. I call this part TV show because the majority of the game is watching the story play out while making a few key choices that do, admittedly, impact the story in big ways. The other part of the game is spent behind a desk, literally dispatching your team of heroes to crises around LA, like kaiju attacks, supervillain cult rituals, or helping someone assemble furniture. This happens in real time with better or worse odds of success depending on the heroes you send, and it can also affect the story in a few ways. Dispatch is hard to categorize. Workplace comedy? Rom-com? Superhero revenge story? It's definitely funny in a dry, irreverent sort of way, but it can also be serious, and a few of the story beats have real emotional weight. Aaron Paul does an awesome job as Mecha Man, and the rest of the characters are really good, especially Chase, Invisigal, Blonde Blazer, Royd, and the villain, Shroud. I don't know, Dispatch was awesome, and I think we might get more Dispatch in the future. The only thing that's tricky is, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here, this feels more like a show I watched this year than a game I played. That's completely fine with me. Entertainment is entertainment, but if you're asking me to compare this to other games I played this year, it's definitely a factor. Still, something unique and worth checking out. I also caught up on a few games that didn't come out this year. I finally beat Baldur's Gate 3 on Honor Mode, which isn't really that hard as long as you pay attention. I've never actually died in Honor Mode, but I've abandoned a few files around the end of Act 1, start of Act 2. But I finally knuckled down and got those golden dice. I also finally finished Elden Ring, which I thought was fun to explore with a really impressive, twisted world and challenging combat, but this is another game that everyone talks about like it's a transformative experience, and for me, it was merely good. I know what people mean because I've had that experience with other games, and I do feel like I low-key go into every game, and book and movie and show for that matter, hoping it's going to be the best and most mind-blowing thing ever, but obviously that can only rarely be the case. But I still liked it, and I did enjoy all the messages between players, warning you of danger around the corner, or recommending that you try finger, but whole. I played Metroid Prime for the first time this year. The first one, not the one that just came out. I'd meant to play this forever. I'd never played a 3D Metroid game before, even though I've played most of the 2D ones. It was, as everyone told me it would be, really good. And not that long, which I appreciated. It took me around 15 hours to beat the game, which is kind of a sweet spot for me with a game like this. Let's see, I've played a fair amount of Pokemon TCG Pocket. I don't play a lot of mobile games, but the cards were a fun throwback. The collectathon aspect is pretty fun, and I got decently far with a Dragonite Draco Meteor deck I made. Mostly, it's just fun to open packs of cards. Oh, and I played Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is better than it has any right to be. I think IP games are finally trending in the right direction. It used to be the case that every major movie release had a companion video game that totally sucked, like it was clearly thrown together to cash in on the merchandising. But lately we've seen a lot of famous IP handed to studios with good reputations who actually care about what they're making. And we've started to see a lot more IP games set in the world of, rather than rotely retreading the exact plot points of a book or film. I'm thinking of Alien Isolation, Hogwarts Legacy, Marvel's Spider-Man, the upcoming 007 First Light, and, of course, this game. I think a difference here is that Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford, which makes it hard to stray too far from the movies, but Troy Baker does an incredible impression that's pretty near perfect.
Ancient Egyptian, obviously. A depiction of Bastet.
The whole game was just a good, silly adventure. I'm sure I played a few other miscellaneous games this year, but those were the highlights. That's what I played this year, so now it's time to hand out some awards I made up. Most replay value. Which of these games has the most replay value? It's a good question. I might replay Donkey Kong Bananza at some point for some kind of Donkey Kong retrospective playthrough. And I'll definitely replay Silksong, for sure when they release new DLC. I want to play through Silksong again using a different crest for a different experience. Dispatch is pretty replayable, especially to make different story choices and see how that plays out. I don't see myself playing Clair Obscur or Ghost of Yotei again. I think I've checked those boxes. I'll probably continue to play Jackbox, Mario Kart World, or Peak occasionally with friends. I would replay Split Fiction if someone wanted to, and I'd probably suggest it over It Takes Two. I think Blue Prince deserves a special mention here, because you usually can't replay mystery games, but I think you could enjoyably replay Blue Prince, and maybe I will in a few years when I forget some of the finer details. However, if I was going to pick up any of these games and keep playing them right now, there's no question, it's Hades 2. Hades 2 has an incredible endgame, with an endless string of achievements, difficulty options, and challenges to complete. There's also so many ways to approach your runs, and the game incentivizes you to use every method at your disposal. There's also lingering story threads to keep pulling on, relationships to max out, and pet variants to unlock. This is a game that's designed to last, and I think has amazing replay value. Best Protagonist. Video games have produced a lot of iconic protagonists, but how does this year stack up? Obviously, some games like Mario Kart and Mario Party don't have protagonists, while others like Blue Prince have pretty nondescript protagonists. Clair Obscur had a fantastic cast of characters, but kind of suffers in this category from being an ensemble cast. Maëlle is the closest thing to our protagonist here, and although I liked her, some of the most interesting things about Maëlle had to do with other characters' interactions with her, if you know what I mean. Overall, it was the year of the female protagonists. In addition to Clair Obscur, Split Fiction, Ghost of Yotei, Hades 2, and Silksong all featured leading ladies, and the last three are all sequels to games without female leads. Mio and Zoe, the protagonists of Split Fiction, are fine. Atsu's journey in Ghost of Yotei was pretty fun, but I felt like the game couldn't decide if her revenge quest was awesome or if she should go home and rethink her life, and that murkiness undercut her character a little bit. I do like Melinoë, the daughter of Hades and younger sister of Zagreus. She's cool and cynical and self-assured, but it's hard to compete with Zagreus, who's one of my favorite protagonists. Melinoë's voice actor, Judy Alice Lee, also voiced Vex, one of the possible protagonists of Borderlands 4. The Borderlands 4 Vault Hunters are actually pretty cool, both from a gameplay perspective and personality personality-wise. On both fronts, Vex is my favorite Vault Hunter. She's a necromancy siren who can summon ghostly minions, cast eldritch blasts, and, before it was nerfed, inflict infinite bleed with a throwing knife, which I have to say was pretty satisfying. In the midst of all these leading ladies, Aaron Paul's Mecha Man was one of the best and most understated protagonists of the year. You really feel this guy is carrying the weight of his family's legacy on his shoulders, and he feels like a guy trying to do the right thing despite being exhausted and beaten down by the world around him. Obviously, you can play him in a few different ways, but that was a standout. However, my favorite protagonist of the year is the one I was the most apprehensive about, Hornet. Thematically, mechanically, personality-wise, this little spider has catapulted herself into my list of all-time favorite video game protagonists. The hunter being hunted, only to turn around and hunt her hunters right back, is exactly what I want for Hornet. Her grace, agility, and deadly skill come through in her moveset, and I was hanging on to her every word throughout the game. One of the best surprises of the year for me. Best Villain. I don't know if it was the strongest year for video game villains. Several of these games don't even have villains. I think the most disappointing villain was Kronos, the time-bending titan from Hades 2. As much as I love Hades 2, he's not really doing it for me. I would say the three best villains this year were Lord Saito, the head of the Yotei 6 in Ghost of Yotei, Shroud, Mecha Man's nemesis from Dispatch, and Renoir, the mysterious figure who opposes the members of Expedition 33. It's kinda hard to pick a winner from that bunch because they all have a few pros and cons. Lord Saito is a presence that looms over Ghost of Yotei really effectively. I think he's a good and charismatic villain, and his relationship with his sons is presented in an interesting way, although perhaps he veers into cartoonish villain territory once or twice. Shroud is a supervillain who is supernaturally good at calculating the odds, which sounds kinda dumb, but I think it works. He also killed your dad and destroyed your supersuit, so screw that guy. Also voiced by Matthew Mercer, which is cool. Renoir, portrayed by Andy Serkis, is a complex villain with motivations you can debate. He's charismatic, dangerous, and perhaps the most sympathetic of these three. He also does arguably the most memorable villainous act of the year, so that's something. I don't know, I guess the villain that stuck with me the most is Renoir, so he's my pick for best villain of the year. Best ending. No spoilers, obviously, but I think the end of a game can sometimes be the biggest takeaway, so what games ended with a bang this year? Donkey Kong Bananza had kind of a cool ending, albeit somewhat out of nowhere. Still memorable though, but I think the big contenders here are Dispatch, Ghost of Yotei, Silksong, and Expedition 33. The ending of Dispatch is cool, especially since it's tailored to your choices. Who Robert ends up with, the future of the Z-Team, and your confrontation with Shroud are all on the table. I can only speak for my ending, but I was happy with it. Ghost of Yotei has a surprisingly good ending that really brings everything full circle in a cool way and ends on an emotional note. Silksong technically has multiple endings, but there is a true ending, and it's glorious. Like Ghost of Yotei, Silksong takes a sweeping epic and ends it on a decidedly personal note, which is always my favorite kind of ending. Expedition 33, of course, also has opposing endings, neither of which are entirely satisfactory, but I mean that in the best possible way. I think the best ending this year is Expedition 33. It's the most talked about, the most thought-provoking, and presents a fascinating choice to the player. I can see the case for either ending, and I thought that was awesome. Best multiplayer. Okay, let's round up the multiplayer titles here. Mario Kart World, Super Mario Party Jamboree, and Jackbox Party Pack 11 are all party games, essentially, which I enjoy for the most part. I played through Borderlands 4 with a friend, which has pretty much always been my favorite way to play Borderlands. That was fun overall. I think you can play Donkey Kong Bananza semi-cooperatively, but I didn't, and I don't really like these cooperative modes where one player isn't doing nearly as much as the other player. No, I think this is between two games, Split Fiction and Peak, which I like for completely opposite reasons. Split Fiction is really good, and compared to Peak, a tightly designed and highly curated experience. Working through these levels with a friend produces a lot of shared aha moments and discoveries that are memorable, and you really feel like a team in some pretty epic situations. Peak is a vehicle for having silly, stupid fun with your friends. In the right circumstances, you could have the same kind of fun just hanging out and goofing around, but it's an excuse for everyone to hang out virtually, laugh, and climb a mountain together. I don't know, I'm really torn here, and these are both great. I think I'll say Split Fiction for now, but I'm open to changing my mind as I play more Peak, or they keep updating it. Not that it matters, what matters is that these are both great ways to have fun with friends. Best Art. There wasn't a bad-looking game this year, maybe Peak, which has its own form of charm, but this is a three-horse race for me between Clair, Obscur, Hades 2, and Silksong. Clair Obscur, befitting its name, has a dramatic, surreal art style with dreamlike environments and incredibly bombastic and memorable boss fights. I suppose it's a mark against Hades 2 and Silksong that we've already seen these art styles before, but both are stunners. Hades 2 is like a graphic novel brought to life, with stunning character portraits and really good enemy design. Plus, as a fan of Greek mythology, it's always fun to see how Supergiant reimagines various figures, like Icarus, Heracles, or Prometheus. But the best art for me this year was Silksong. The characters and enemies were so good, and Farloom is 10 times more vibrant and varied than Halonest. I spent a long time in this game just wandering around staring at the backgrounds. The animation in Silksong is a real work of art, and in fairness to Clair Obscur, I think I'm more drawn to 2D animation in general, but I just found the world and characters of Silksong to be really striking. Best soundtrack. There were a lot of soundtracks I liked this year. Kaizen, A Factory Story had the perfect background music for designing thinky assembly lines. Dispatch had a cool soundtrack that built some bold themes and leitmotifs around particular characters, which I think was awesome and really memorable. Ghost of Yotei marries traditional shamisen songs with a rip-roaring score to great effect, and Hades 2 is back with some gnarly guitar tracks that really sell this unique vision of Greek mythology. But this is a contest between Clair Obscur and Silksong. Two amazing OSTs, but I have to bow to my end-of-the-year YouTube recap and give it to Silksong. I think the score in Silksong was even better than Hollow Knight. The Bell Beast song, Phantom's organ theme, Lace's theme, Trabio, and just hearing both of the trailer tracks finally appear in game, as epic as I could have hoped, and my most listened to game soundtrack of the year. Coolest level design. In this category, I'm thinking about specific areas or levels that really stood out to me, with level defined as broadly as possible. I really liked Teshio Ridge in Ghost of Yotei. It's a northern, mountainous, wintry region with traps and shinobi that pop out of the snow to ambush you, and lots of hidden ninja fortresses to discover. I thought that was really cool. Silksong had a few levels I'll always remember, like Mount Fae, Lost Verdania, and Bellheart. There were a few memorable levels in Donkey Kong Bananza, but I think my favorite was the resort layer, with these chunky sharks you can punch into rainbows, and chunks of rainbow you can tear off that lift you into the sky. I really like this abandoned town in Hades 2, the city of Ephyra, which lets you choose which boons and upgrades to go after. And, for that matter, the following regions, the Rift of Thessaly and Mount Olympus. The entire mansion in Blue Prince is one of the coolest levels ever, the way it shifts and shuffles around. But I think the level that I'll always remember is the split-screen level in Split Fiction, where half the world is futuristic and the other half is fantasy. This is so clever. Spaceships become dragons as they cross the split screen, and you might alternate between witches' brooms and hoverboards as you yourself cross the split screen. This is one of the most creative and well-executed levels I've ever seen, so this one goes to Split Fiction. Best throwing knives. Ah yes, on to an important category. There were a lot of throwing knives this year, but who did it best? Here's the contenders. Coupe from Dispatch is a winged assassin whose main weapon is a seemingly endless supply of throwing blades. In Ghost of Yotei, Atsu uses kunai to stagger enemies in combat or to target unsuspecting victims, and with the right upgrades, you can chain kunai throws together with other assassination techniques. Hornet gets her hands on two versions of throwing knives, the straight pin and the threefold pin, which are similar but thrown for distance and burst damage respectively. And they can also be poisoned with the polyp pouch. Anyone in Borderlands 4 can use throwing knives in place of grenades, but Vex made the best use of them through a bleed crit build. The best knife modifier before it was nerfed made all damage to the target critical hits for the next 5 seconds, and Vex's ability to inflict bleed combined with this to produce crazy amounts of damage. Essentially, bleed itself could crit, and trigger more bleed, and launch a chain reaction that took down bosses in one damage burst. Ciel in Expedition 33 throws cards as part of her free aim action, but those aren't knives, so I'm sorry, they don't count. It's a tough one. I actually used the straight pin a lot in Silksong, so I have a connection to it. The kunai were also very cool and fun, but I think this award goes to Borderlands 4 for how stupid and funny the throwing knives were. Best Animal Companion. We all love our furry friends, but which game featured the best animal companion this year? Let's have a look at the candidates. Vex in Borderlands 4 can summon a spirit energy saber-toothed tiger phase familiar named Trouble. He's cool, I guess. Technically, Donkey Kong is an animal companion to Pauline, but everyone's favorite rhinoceros, Rambi, also shows up at some point. In Hades 2, Melanoe has 5 possible animal familiars: a toad, a cat, a raven, a hound, and a polecat, which can accompany her on her runs. I like the familiars, which each have their own little skill tree, but they have more utility than personality, and there's 5 of them, which sort of dilutes my opinion of them. Do Minoko or SK count as animal companions? I don't think so. SK has some pet rocks, but those don't count either. Atsu has two animal companions. First, a horse who accompanies you throughout the entire game. Mine was a black horse I named Mochizuki. And second, a wolf that Atsu bonds with during the game. The wolf can be summoned by a dedicated shamisen song and mauls enemies on your behalf. Almost everyone in Silksong is an animal of some variety, but your real animal companion here is the Bell Beast, who you initially meet in combat. By the end of the game, I had a lot of affection for the Bell Beast, who is one of Hornet's best allies. The Wolf and the Bell Beast are both very good, and I could make a case for either of them, but I think the winner here is the one I haven't mentioned yet.
My name's Beef and I'm naked.
Oh, no, I refuse to believe that's what he sounds like.
Beef is Robert/Mecha Man's dog, and he's a constant loyal companion throughout the 8 episodes, and factors into the plot more than you might expect. He's my pick for the best boy of the year, and I think Jeffrey Wright's character would wholeheartedly agree. Funniest game. I don't know if any of the games this year were laugh-out-loud funny. There were funny moments in Silksong and Split Fiction, and even Clair Obscur, despite the dark tone overall. Donkey Kong Bananza was pretty funny at times. Dispatch was well written and had a lot of irreverent deadpan humor that I think worked pretty well. Jackbox 11 is obviously designed to be funny, which it is, but it didn't have me rolling, and the humor is pretty dependent on the players. Honestly, I think the funniest game of the year is Peak. Not only is the art style pretty hilarious, but there's also the potential for some really funny moments. Most emotional. I thought parts of Silksong were pretty affecting, especially the third act, which had some moments of desperation and a pretty emotional climax. The end of Ghost of Yotei was actually pretty emotional, more than the rest of the game actually, but some of the family stuff in Yotei hit hard. Dispatch had a few emotional character moments, especially around Robert, Chase, and Invisigal. The end of episode 6 packed a punch. But come on, the most emotional game this year was Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. The premise is sad. A lot of what happens throughout the game is sad, and by the end, you feel really sorry for most of these characters. Even the best possible outcomes are bittersweet. But I think the most emotional component of Expedition 33 is the bond between the expeditioners. The absolute lengths to which they're willing to go for one another, and the shared understanding that they're undertaking something bigger than any of them. I think a theme that hits hard for me, and this is touched on in Silksong as well, is striving in the face of impossible odds, against forces beyond your understanding, even if you have no way of knowing or expecting that your actions will make a difference. Games that I missed but am most likely to play at some point. You can also weigh in here, because I'm sure that there's plenty of hidden gems I'm not even aware of, but here's some of the games I missed that I'm interested in playing. At some point, I'd like to play some of the indies I missed. Ball Pit, Absalom, Megabonk, and Despelote all look good. That said, even though I usually end up liking roguelikes, the idea of starting a new one is very tiring to me. Speaking of which, I also wanted to check out Wanderstop at some point, and probably will. As a longtime fan of the series, I feel somewhat honor-bound to check out Civilization 7 eventually, even though it doesn't look that great. 2 Point Museum also seems really cool. I think I'd have fun playing that. I don't know how I feel about Death Stranding, but I have no real interest in playing it. I don't know, people do seem to like it. It's weird, and I like Metal Gear, but I don't want to watch Norman Reedus carry a baby around a wasteland for hours on end. Who knows, maybe I'd like it, but I have no itch to play it. That means the game I'm most interested in and most likely to play is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Honestly, the main barrier for me is how long it is, but I'm intrigued and I think it's a game I might start over the winter holidays. But yeah, let me know what you think about these games, or any other 2025 games you'd recommend. And without any further ado, let's get to the big one. Game of the Year. Bearing in mind that I haven't played Kingdom Come Deliverance or Death Stranding, I already told you what I played this year. My S-tier games this year would be, in no particular order, Blueprints, Clair Obscur, Hades 2, and Hollow Knight Silksong. A-tier games, Peak, Dispatch, Split Fiction, Kaizen, A Factory Story, and Ghost of Yotei. B tier, which I would call still very fun, but not exactly a work of art, Donkey Kong Bananza, Mario Kart World, Borderlands 4, Jackbox 11, and Is This Seat Taken? This might be more fun if I had more negative opinions, but I really didn't play a bad game this year, except for the stupid camera minigames in Mario Party Jamboree. Those are F tier. But I won't keep you in suspense. My personal 2025 Game of the Year was Hollow Knight Silksong. I was prepared to be disappointed. I was braced for mediocrity. I said a million times before this came out, there's no way it could top Hollow Knight. But it did. Silksong was everything I hoped it could be. The score, the world, the danger. Hornet was the perfect protagonist. The story was creepy and cool, and the lore was deeper than ever. I loved the side characters and the crests and the new tool system. I loved the 3-act structure. I loved the difficulty and the boss fights against the First Sinner, Lace, Phantom, and Carmelita. I even loved the runbacks, sprinting past swamp water with vengeance in my heart for Grohl the Great. Not just my favorite game of 2025, but easily one of my top 10 games of all time. Yo, that was what my 2025 looked like, but I want to hear about the games you played in 2025, or your thoughts on the games I talked about. There's so much stuff that comes out, which is great, but it's impossible to get to everything. If you want to stay tuned to the channel, go ahead and like, subscribe, all the rest of it. I have a lot more videos planned for next year, so be sure to check back soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch ya in 2026.